What's up, guys? How's it going? Welcome to the Social Butterfly. What's up, guys? What's up? Hey. I know it's been a hot minute since I've done a Social Butterfly podcast, but here I am. I am your host, Tiffany Barney, and I am just so happy to be back. So, I have such a special guest today. She is such a near and dear friend. Um, we go way back, actually. I've known her for quite some time now. And without further ado, let's bring this beautiful girl on. Her name is Laura Castillo. All right.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Okay, here she is, y'all. And just to let you guys know, if y'all tune in and let us know where you're watching. Like, we want to see you in the chat. We want to hang out with you. So go ahead, leave some comments, leave, where you're watching from. And we're so excited for you to join us. Again, before I fully allow Laura to talk, I just want to kind of rewind and just share with you guys where I met her, how God put her in my life. It was such a divine appointment, and I didn't know how long term it was going to be. Sometimes when you first meet someone, you're like, oh, it's just a church person, whatever. They might just be in your outer circle or whatever. But this one was actually meant to be for life. She has been in my inner circle of friends for quite some time. I love her so much. And yeah, so everybody, welcome Laura. Hey.
Well, I'm happy to be on your show. And this has
Yeah,
been, like you said, in the making for a long time.
right.
We've talked about it for years. I can't even
Literally.
remember how long, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad finally to be able to, I don't know, join on something that God put on your heart. And
Yeah.
I just love your obedience and pursuing whatever He has you do. That's what you do.
I'm on it. Most of the time anyways, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just going to share with everybody about how I met Laura. Some years ago, I want to say this was in like 2015-ish, 2016-ish,
Mhm.
maybe.
Yeah.
It was quite some time ago. The church that we both used to go to, we had never met before, but they were like, hey, if you want to be in a rave ministry, there's a sign up in the back of the church. And so we both meet. We're the only people out of the entire church. God's like, you here, you come over here too, and you guys meet. And we just both gravitated to the sign up sheet, and we were like, and I'm like looking at her like, you know what a rave is? Like, because not anybody at churches typically know what a rave is. And she's like, yeah, I know what a rave is. And anyway, so that's how we met. We met at the Connect booth. Like, that's
Yeah.
prophetic in itself, right? It's like Connect booth. And
Yeah.
here we are, like 10 years later. And she's also a board member. She's also the secretary of Heart of Dance. If you guys don't know, I run a nonprofit organization called Heart of Dance. We host clean, safe dance environments for people to come worship Jesus to EDM music. And we worship also using worship flags. And let me tell you, it is so much fun. But yes, enough about me and all the things. Let's just jump right into it, guys. So, I guess this was kind of whenever we were first starting Heart of Dance. I had called Laura and I was like, "Hey, girl, um, let's do a podcast or let's go live or whatever." And that was so foreign to both of us back then. And so we got all dressed. We put on our little Heart of Dance t-shirts, and I like go to her house, and she has the whole setup with like the ring light and the whole thing, and we're like, "Ooh, we're so professional," you know. We had like no idea what we were going to talk about. I mean, we were like very kind of all over the place, and
Yeah.
she doesn't know this, but I actually kept a couple of those like bloopers. So before we get into our testimony, dude, you guys, you can kind of see our friendship through these two like 10-second bloopers. Let me
Here's
show you. Check this
a
out.
yeah. So if we were to just talk regularly like this, let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Testing. Test.
Testing.
Test. 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 I know our laugh.
No. Okay.
Okay, let's
crazy.
see.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. But yeah, so anyways, I just thought that that was hilarious. And so I had to bring that on because it's such like good memories, right? So fun. We actually, yeah, we had no idea what the heck we were going to talk about.
We
And
recorded the whole thing and then we didn't know how to do what to do with it. I remember, I think I still have a copy of it too. And I'm like, one day maybe this will we'll be able to use something out of it. But yeah, it finally
we're
happened.
rambling for like an hour about things that were so, I don't know, just out of nowhere. But yeah, we tried. We tried. Here's one last
Yeah.
quick 2-second blooper, guys. This is pretty funny. Check this out.
Okay. So
Kumbaya.
I don't know why that's the song that popped in my head. So you know about that local sports team, right? I hear they're going all the way this year.
Is it football season?
I don't know. I don't pay
either.
attention to that.
Me either.
Okay.
Let's check it out.
A little bit of technical difficulty. Sorry, y'all.
I didn't
Oh
know
my
if it was
God.
just on my end.
Oh no, we got it. Here we go. Here we go. No, we got it. But yeah, I mean, that was so funny. You started singing Kumbaya, my lord. I'm like, really?
I don't remember that part.
But we were like so cute. I mean, gosh, that was what, like 5 years ago when we did that? And we never did anything with the podcast.
No. This is way better. This is way better.
So better. But yeah, it is just such an honor to have you on tonight, Laura. And I thank you so much for taking your time and being with us tonight. Excuse all the staticky audio, people. Sorry. Can you hear that on your end?
I can hear it on my end. Yeah, but it's cleared up now.
Oh, great. Okay,
Yeah.
let's take this window. And so I wanted to bring you on to discuss your testimony. I
Okay.
think that very, very, very little people know how you got saved, how God pulled you out of drugs, the rave scene. And so, yeah, I say, if you don't mind sharing your testimony with us, let's start,
Okay.
what life was like whenever you grew up, whenever you were a child.
Okay.
And tell
Well,
us where you're from and tell us you're married, how many kids you have, all the things.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's all like actually after this so I was saved on Resurrection Sunday in 2006 and when this year's completed, I'll actually be living longer as a Christian than as a non-believer. So that's pretty
Wow.
cool. But
That is
yeah, yeah. So um, just like where I'm at now, it's kind of to see like a full circle of God's grace and goodness. So I am a mother of four. Big age range, 3 sons, 1 daughter, and my husband is a believer. But I mean,
Shout out
that's where
to
we're at now.
Joel.
My Jolie, he's amazing, and huge. He has such a gentle, gracious heart towards taking on a family of 4. Because I was a single mom when we got married almost 8 years ago, and so you were one of my bridesmaids.
I was.
Tiffany was one of my bridesmaids, and it's an amazing wedding that God put together. But childhood, I'd say it was kind of rough. I mean, I have brought up in a home where I knew my parents loved me. Uh-oh, you go by my charger. They well, they were my parents were truck drivers. They traveled out of town a lot, and my grandmother's the one that really helped stabilize like our my childhood, like where I had a home and it wasn't babysitters or there wasn't an issue of like who's going to take care of us. So I'd say like I felt stability once we were staying with my grandmother, and she was like our caretaker, and that allowed for my parents to go out of town. And nowadays it's not too much of a it's not I mean it's still hard to be like out of town parents, but you
Yeah.
have cell phones, you have digital. In my child early years we didn't have that, so my parents would call from a payphone like at a truck stop, and if we
Yeah.
were around then we got to talk to them. And it was it's hard being in a long distance relationship with your parents. Okay. So that was kind of sad, but I have great parents. They provided for us. They did what they knew how to do. They were young when they had my oldest sister. I think my mom was 18, and so they did what they could. And but that distance in our relationship, I guess, allowed for a lot of me figuring it out, like me and my sisters figuring out things for ourselves. And we didn't have consistency in like going to church. Even though my parents were believers, we were a family that followed Jesus and
Wow.
knew that we were supposed to read the Bible, but without the availability of like, consistent interaction and discipleship,
Yeah.
intentional. Um, None of that stuck when I became a teenager.
Yeah.
And I'd have to say there were some traumatic moments in early childhood. Initially, what led to us moving to stay with my grandmother is a really an ill babysitter.
Mm.
She was mentally ill, and for some reason, I was a target of her abuse. And it was only 1 week that she was like living and staying with us. And within that week, my mom saw a change from when she left us to when she came back, and she was getting ready to leave again. Both my parents were, and they they sorry, technical difficulties has been like the theme of today.
Right. With no
um,
internet.
so, but my mom had a feeling, and thank God for mother's intuition, right? But she had a
Right.
feeling on her way out that something was wrong, and so they left, and they quietly, like, I guess they went like in a circle or something around the neighborhood and circled back around to the house, and she could hear this woman insulting me and mocking me, and like getting very aggressive. And that was it. That was, my mom confronted her, told her she needed to leave. They pulled the plug on all of that, and eventually that led to us moving in with my grandmother to stay. And so, which was a good thing, you know, it led
Yeah.
to a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think for a child that experiences early years unsafety and like the ugliness to evil in the world,
Right.
um, it can linger as they develop into adolescence, which I think is what happened to me. So around the ages of like 10 and 11, realizing that there was, you know, there's dangers in the world or whatnot, but also like trying to figure out your place in the world. Unfortunately, another traumatic event happened. A family member, um, kind of, it was an incident that happened that led into me not wanting to be vocal about trauma to my family.
Right.
So I started reaching out to friends and other kids for like adult advice, you know.
Yeah.
And I think all of that led into this facade of like friends taking the place of family.
Right.
The culture or the community around me was more of a priority than my family was, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I
And
do.
so, um, until, and that's, you know, I'd say around the age of, I was around 12, 13. I started lying about where I was going, and I'd go with my friends and tell my grandmother, take advantage of her, you know, her willingness to trust me.
Yeah.
I would say I'm going somewhere else, and I'd be somewhere else. And it led to an essay situation, which growing up with the basic principles of, you know, my faith in Jesus, I had every intention of like being a virgin when I got married. I had every intention to like try and obey like the things I knew about God, and that's where my heart was. But when that assault happened, it was really confusing, and because of a previous situation with a family member, I didn't feel safe to talk to my family about it. And so I spoke to a cousin, a peer, you know, and but about the same time, she was going through her own things too. And I just kind of followed the lead on, you know, whatever helped me cope. That's where I wanted to do. So I don't normally talk about that part. It's really easy to skip
Yeah.
the SA parts in our testimonies, which, I mean, for people,
Yeah.
it can be. I can just skip. I used to just skip and go into like, oh, I was a drug addict.
Yeah.
But one day, God like really revealed to me that I was self medicating, that I was trying to find a resolve, a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And instead of going to him or even knowing to going, I felt like I was no longer able to go to him,
Yeah.
being young and knowing that, you know, sexual immorality separates us from God and is a sin.
Right.
And again, I wasn't brought up with biblical content for things like that. And so I was told, of course, you need to read your Bible. And when my parents were in town, we talk about God, and my mom would share things about God. But that was something I wasn't open with her about.
Yeah.
And I felt like that really left room for, um, you know, the what is that? The gateway drugs, you know?
I'm gonna stop you right there for one
Yeah.
second. Um, First of all, I've known you for, like we just said, 10 years,
Yeah.
and you've never shared the essay thing. So I just want to say thank you so much for being so vulnerable and open to talking about that, because I feel like so many young people are going through that behind closed
Mm-hmm.
doors of some sort. I went through it at a younger age. I was probably 5 is when all
Yeah.
that stuff started for me. And it was at a babysitter's as well. So I can completely identify with you and sympathize, and it's happening to children, things like that happen to kids all the time, and it's so unfortunate. And a lot of times they have no power, they have no understanding, and it entraps them at such a young age. And so the enemy knows that we were young, or kids are young. So
Mm-hmm.
he weasels his way in however he can to try to do damage as early as possible. So there's no chance of even growing up with a healthy future. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Oh
And,
yeah.
and so he just still kills and destroys, and in this case, distorts us at a young age. And
Right.
so, and it's right before we hit teenage years, whenever we start going crazy, you know?
Oh
And
yeah.
so, it's almost like a really demonic, like, catapult into a wild lifestyle in a way. It's like
Yeah.
terrible plans, but I just had to stop you and just say thank you so much for being outspoken, because I feel like you said, nobody talks about it. And
Mm-hmm.
people do skip over things like that in their testimony. It was really hard for me to talk about it publicly as well. But God got me to a place of just saying, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. So I just want to let you know it's okay.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about it because one of the things I wish I had known back then is that those kind of situations, things that people do to us that is labeled sin, um, that doesn't that's not your identity. That's not who God sees you as, and you're not even a victim. I learned that later. There's so many things that I learned later about God's perspective in or perspective of who He says I am.
Yeah.
That brought a lot of healing and redirected my thoughts about and exposed a lot of lies that I was believing. Like that was the first time, but because of my choices, I put myself in other situations where it happened again. Um, and that time it was one of my dealers, and I I just let it go. Really, I began to believe that maybe that's all I'm here for. Maybe I'm not supposed to be one of the people that God wants a part of His kingdom. I felt very um, detached and separated, and a lot of that was, I mean, like the enemy was having his way with my way of thinking,
Right.
and but it was my mom later that because I just let, I guess, from the age of 13 to the age of 18, I had decided all I wanted to ever be when I grew up was the party girl, was the drug addict. I didn't have any future or any goals or ambitions to get a career, or I just want to pay my bills, get my drugs, and that was it.
Yeah.
I had also struggled with some health conditions when I was younger. Um, I don't have very good kidneys, and so I was there's different specialists and different health issues. I was told that I couldn't have children, and so I was like, well, yeah.
Oh, I did. Sorry.
God had a different plan.
Oh, 100%.
but, But yeah, I was told I could not have children, and so I was like, well, I can't even have a family, you know. And then the way that um, intimacy was introduced into my life was so vulgar, and it was so tainted that, like, I didn't see romance the way maybe, other people did. To me, that was always just like, I don't know, there was a lot of issues I had in not understanding relations that way. It led to a point, I remember, around the age 16 or so. Um, I had made up my mind because I had been trying to OD actually. There wasn't My one goal in life was to try every drug at least once. Um, and so I didn't really have any limits towards anything. Whatever I could get my hands on, I was okay with. And again, that put me in a lot of situations with dangerous people, with people that, and there were a lot of good people too. Like, there were some really good friends. But there's predators. And for a teenager looking to get intoxicated without any limit, those predators are looking for a person like that. And so I was an easy target. God truly protected me. I was never arrested. I was almost trafficked once. But I think because my tolerance was so high, I came to. Like, they tried to roofie me, but it didn't take. I like I was in some hotel room with a friend of mine. I grabbed her and I was like, we got to get out of here. I just remember it was so hard to walk. I went to the front desk. We didn't know where we were. And I told the front desk, I don't know where we are. I need a phone. And my friend was able to call somebody to pick us up. And by the grace of God, I made it home. But I believe, looking back on it now, I was like, wow, I think we were about to get trafficked. Our ride was supposed to take us to the club, and we ended up in a hotel room. Crazy stories like that.
Yeah. I have quite a bit of those myself, so I totally get it.
Yeah. I just, and of course, like, my parents thought I was somewhere else. My grandmother thought I was somewhere else. And those kind of situations always, I don't know. I look back now and I'm like, wow, it's a miracle. Things didn't go completely as bad as they could, knowing a difference now. But all of that is to eventually lead up to the age of 17. My life took a big turn. My goals and everything were still the same, but my childhood home caught fire one night, or early morning actually. It was around 7 a.m. And the fire started in my room. It was an electrical fire, and that changed everything. It cut off ties to people that, well, we didn't have cell phones. So, like, my landline was gone. People couldn't contact me. I was homeless. I lived in my car. That forced me to find work. So education kind of took the back burner in that situation. And it just kind of catapulted me to, I guess, I felt like it affirmed I don't have a purpose or a future in this world, in this ugly world. Like, to me, the world was just so ugly. And my family, eventually we got on our feet. We got into an apartment. I never lived in an apartment before. That was new. And by just by God's design, my upstairs neighbor was, for about 2 years, we had never talked, but he was this guy that I saw upstairs every once in a while, caught my eye. eventually in the future, we did become friends. About the same time, I had heavily decided to cut ties to people that I knew really kept on telling me to like get my act together, or like that they love me, they were concerned for me, and I'm just like, it's better off that you just don't have anything to do with me because I'm not going to be here one day or soon. That was my plan.
It sounds like you were really wrestling with suicide.
Oh, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But my plan was to OD. That was my goal. And I realized later, like going through raves, going to clubs, going like I had my friend group that um, I would get together with, and the problem is we would all get really really high, and the come downs were just so unbearable
No.
that we just run back out and do it again. And then I didn't have school. I had 2 jobs. I had 3 jobs at one point. After the house fire, that I mean, it was just so wild. Like at 17, that was my life, and I was uncontrollable by that time. My mom was so worried. My stepdad was so worried, and I was driving intoxicated, by that time, and they had to make the hard call of tough love, and I was coming home messed up all the time, which I had a younger sibling. I was exposing my family to like really ugly things, and so they said I wasn't welcome in the home anymore. I had to find somewhere else to live. Um, that's where the neighbor upstairs comes in. Um, we had become friends at that time, and they had somewhere for me to stay. So I went to stay, and that's generally what happens when I think people in their adolescence get homeless and they can't go home. They'll find somewhere to stay. I think the term is couch surfing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't really do that. I slept on the floor in a 1 bedroom with like 8 other people living there.
Wow.
And everybody had like their certain spot on the floor. I don't know. But to me, it had to be the drugs. I thought it was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I was
So,
totally convinced.
when did you start getting into the rave scene? And how did that happen?
13. 13
Okay.
is when I started the rave scene.
Okay.
That happened through my cousin, the one that I had shared about the essay. And actually, I had no intentions to ever start doing drugs. I was smoking cigarettes by 13.
Yeah.
And my oldest sister was very against my smoking cigarettes. She thought it was a nasty habit. She did not support me. And so she would never buy me any packs. And so, but I would steal cigarettes from people or whatnot. And, but I went to my one of my cousin's houses, and there were a bunch of people there, like a lot of her friends, that they were passing around a joint. I had never smoked weed before, and that time I was binging for a cigarette, but nobody had any. That's all they had. So I was like, okay, whatever. That's what I'll do.
Yeah.
And it turned into like a binger. Like I stayed there for a week, and all kinds of things came through. And about 13 is when eventually I didn't even know that going to the rave was going to the rave. I was just tagging along with other people that wanted to dance, knew somewhere I could go. The all age club, Numbers was
Yeah.
one of the places that I felt like you could network into finding out about raves and
Yeah.
other after parties and things like that.
100%.
Yeah. And
That's such
so,
a gateway.
yeah.
That's what got me all sucked into it as well. It was that
Yeah.
place.
And I think that's one issue that happens in Houston. It's the nightlife in our area that you can um, you can get into really young, and it can skew a lot of everything else the rest of your life, you know.
Sure.
But the raves, I think I started going because my I had family members going. I had older friends, and like I said, I wasn't in school. Um, it just seemed it was just something really big that was coming up in that time frame too, in Houston particularly.
It's huge. It was
Yeah.
absolutely huge. So what year are you thinking? Like late 90s, early 2000s?
It was like late '90s for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, because I had already been to a few. That's how I remember it. And then like being intoxicated time frame is so weird. And
It
so
is.
I, I remember that my oldest sister was graduating in 2000 because there was like this whole millennial thing of like, I don't know, computers were going to break down or something.
Yeah,
But
Y2K. It was called Y2K.
yes,
I was at a rave. I went to a
yes,
rave that night that the whole world was supposed to end, and they were
yes,
making this huge deal about it. And I will never forget. I'm walking through and I'm on all these drugs, and all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh wait, I'm still here. What time is it?" And I looked at my clock, and it said 1 a.m. And I'm like, "Wait, wasn't the world supposed to end at 12? Oh,
yeah,
okay, well, it didn't happen." Like I was late,
yeah,
like it was late even figuring it out. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I
That's how
remember.
I remember. Like I had already been to a couple raves of, gosh, I can't remember the name of like, I can't remember the name of any of them. But that was kind of like the the hay that broke the camel's back. Like once you bring in like all of the things happening, and then what the mantra of the rave scene was, you know, plur. And I had been looking for a place in this world for myself, and I had felt I no one from the church ever did anything to reject me. I felt like I didn't fit in. Like
Yeah,
I'm not one of those
people.
clean people is what I
Yeah,
thought. You know, I felt tainted, and that um the things that I had been doing, the things that had been done to me, I was like, there's no way I'm supposed to be made to be one of those people, you
yeah,
know, there's such
yes.
darkness in my life.
Mhm.
And I separated myself um, secretly, you know, in my heart. I felt
Yeah,
like I was a reject, you know,
yes, absolutely.
and
Well, it's a lie. It's also
it
the
is
enemy lying to keep you separated. Does that make sense?
definitely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because you could become your own enemy in that situation. Like,
Yes.
but I did still pray. I remember I would still pray to Jesus, especially like if something was happening with cops. I'm like, please, Jesus, you
Oh
know.
yeah, of course.
You know?
Anyways, Lord, I'm sorry, but I'm in a situation, so knock, knock, knock.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I
and you
hear you.
know, I think about it now, and I'm just like, wow, he was still listening even then. His
Yeah,
heart was still for me even then, you know.
100%.
Um, but I did. I never rejected that Jesus was God to me. And in my mindset, I thought that was the gospel. I thought I was saved because I wasn't an atheist, or I didn't believe that Jesus wasn't God. And
Right.
that's like the basic um,
Misconception.
mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Sure.
so, yeah, but when the rave came into the scene, and the mantra of the rave scene, peace, love, unity, and respect, it's such a counterfeit to
It
the
is.
kingdom of God.
It is.
But I took refuge in it. I
Yes.
found a way to cope and to run away from the trauma, from my hurt, from my situation. And there it was there with open arms to take me in,
Yes.
but to spit you back out later,
It's
and
I often say the rave scene is like a cult.
yeah.
It's literally like a cult. They have their own motto. They worship. They take drugs. It's like there's all of these things. They all dress the same, or lack of
Well,
nowadays. But
and
it's just
cults are counterfeits too.
it's all counterfeit. It's
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
but it does.
Okay. Well, it looks like we lost Laura. Dang it. Sorry. Let's see if we can get her back online. Here she is. Here she is. Let me get her back online.
Hello.
Well, hello. Man, that was a quick recovery, friend. Good job.
Yeah.
Hey guys, hold on. She'll be right back.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying that it was that God kind of creates us with a place that we want to belong.
Yeah.
And that's where I found myself around the age of, I don't know, 17, 18. But I was also homeless. I was also an addict and fully convinced I had no purpose for a place here in this world. And whatever I was here for, I didn't really want it.
So let me
So,
ask you a question really quick
yeah.
about the time of your life. So you were on drugs. You had
Mhm.
people in your life trying to reach out to you, but you really separated yourself even from people that cared for
Yeah.
you. What about your parents? Were they still on the road during this time and wasn't really like aware of the magnitude that you were homeless? Like, did they know you were homeless? Like,
Well, we all became homeless as a family when the
oh,
house burnt down.
okay, got
And so at the time, my mom and my stepdad were working to get us a new place, and they did. We ended up in an apartment.
it. Okay.
But my drug use had just gone worse than it had ever been. I had um, found, I guess, like my kryptonite, which was methamphetamine,
Yeah.
and that kind of took over. Like, I lost track of time. I remember situations like, I have to say, like, one of my saddest and worst addict memories, barely, that I can remember is Thanksgiving dinner. Um, I showed up at midnight for Thanksgiving dinner. I literally fell asleep in front of a plate that my family had prepared for me, that they had put aside. Um, and then I got up and I just left. I just remember seeing everybody's faces really, really sad when I showed up, because I was completely intoxicated. Like, I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't even know it was midnight. But I showed up for Thanksgiving dinner at midnight and fell asleep in front of a plate. I don't know what they were saying to me. People were talking to me. But that's where I was. And I think that's what initially put my parents in a position to draw the line of, like, she can't live with us and be living that way. We
Yeah.
can't keep putting ourselves in that situation. And so, or exposing my youngest sister to me living that way. And so they kicked me out. And that's how I ended up, like, with a group of people that were kind of living like me. And I ended up getting my own apartment when I turned 18. And I went through several different roommates during that time. And one of them I began a relationship with. And I remember we had an agreement that when I OD'd, because it wasn't a question, that was the goal. when I OD'd, they were just supposed to make sure that I wasn't like left on the side of the road or something, like it was like my insurance person, which they were never comfortable with. I don't want to say that they were like, yeah, we're on board with that. Everyone always tried to talk me out of it, to slow down, to like, you know, to not think that way, but I was convinced that I'm not supposed to be here. And one day, this is where the whole narrative changes. And it's really simple. It's just, I had two roommates at the time, and we always had people over all the time. We each had our own friend groups. We had several dealer connections. For whatever reason, nobody could find anything. Like, there was some kind of big bust in Houston.
Yeah.
We couldn't find any kind of narcotics. We were all forced to be sober.
Oh.
And that was torture for me.
Yeah.
And I remember, again, this is before cell phones. So, like, people had to leave to go and, like, network to get, to score something.
Right.
And I decided to stay home. And my two roommates went out to go and score something. They had a couple of leads, and so I was like, "Well, I'll stay here in case so and so will come back, and maybe we'll get something. We have to get something." And we were responsible in the sense of paying all of our bills. We had to choose. We only had enough money to either buy narcotics or buy alcohol, but we always preferred narcotics. We didn't have enough money for both, so.
Right.
We were kind of holding out, but I was forced to be sober. And in my apartment, we didn't have TV or anything like that. We were like really artsy. And
That's awesome.
yeah.
I love that.
So there really wasn't like pastime things to do. So I remember just writing, and I was writing what became a prayer. And then I ended it talking to God about like the tortures of sobriety and how I resented it. And I acknowledged that I was an addict. And I was kind of just expressing to God that I can't stop now. Like, if I do have a purpose, and if you made me with a purpose in a place here, you're going to have to make me stop. And I remember writing that, and that was the end. That was the end of whatever I was writing. I don't know what happened. Eventually, we scored something, and I just shelved it, A week later, I found out that I was expecting. And wow. That was the game changer for me. And I realized I was expecting because I was hungry. I was like ridiculously hungry. Being on meth, you don't really have an appetite. You eat because you have to.
Yeah.
And I ended up making. So my family would drop off groceries sometimes for us. So we always had like odd items in the kitchen. I crushed up peppermint with apricot jelly and ate it on crackers.
That is a new one. I've heard pickles and peanut butter. No. I've heard of like weird things like that, and like fried chicken with like mustard or just whatever. But no, that's a first. Laura.
Yeah, that was the red flag. I was like, what is happening?
That's how I knew I was pregnant. Was because of the what? What was it?
Apricot jelly with I crushed up little peppermints that you get from takeout.
Yeah, like the red and white ones.
Oh red and white and the green and white ones. It didn't matter. I gathered all of the peppermints and I like crushed them like you would. And I mixed it with the jelly.
So I'm gonna crush up some peppermint.
Yeah. It was, I don't know, there was no logic to it, but that was my first meal, like as a expecting mother. And I remember thinking, like, what is happening? Why am I hungry? Why am I willing to eat this? And it tasted so good. And I was like, okay. But that in itself was and then I didn't even have a solution. Like when I wrote that prayer to God, I didn't have a solution. And I didn't expect that I could ever stop. Like being an addict the way I was for so long, I didn't know how to live outside of that. And I had already started my adult life that way. Um, I worked at one of Houston's large novelty smoke shops at the time.
I remember you telling
And yeah, and so like that was my
that was one of
world.
the popular places to go to, that particular shop.
It doesn't
Everyone.
exist anymore, but yeah, it was. And for many years, it was a
Yeah.
big place to go to. But that changed with a life in me, and God used the the news of a baby to filter things in my life. Like I guess I had a zero self-value for myself. And when I became pregnant, that changed. Like all of a sudden, everything that was important in life was like, is it good for the baby? Of course, drugs are not good. Alcohol's not good. So I stopped. I made that stand for sobriety because of my expecting baby.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen a lot
Yeah.
sometimes, but God knew that was the game-changing factor for me. And I remember telling the people that were staying with us or visiting or friends, I'm done. I'm pregnant, and we're gonna be sober. And I went through withdrawals in my living room because I thought it was really cool to have my bedroom and my dining room, living room area, and my dining room was in my bedroom. I don't know. I was like trying to be anti-conformative or something.
Yeah.
But I did. I just remember that week I was at least a week where I was just curled up on my bed, suffering, sweating,
All with
shaking,
child.
sick.
All
Huh?
with a baby. All with child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Withdrawing from drugs, serious drugs, while you were pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember we went to I don't know what organization it was, but there was some kind of organization where they did a test for us and they confirmed, like for free, and they confirmed that I was pregnant. Because I had just done like the regular, I think it was a dollar store test. And, but when I knew like for certain I was expecting, I was done using. And I remember though, my friends would still save my portion. Like we were kind of like, I don't know, I guess what people would think hippies are like. We would share everything.
Right.
So they expected me to not follow through. But I did. And as I made that stance up for sobriety, a lot of the people I knew ended up leaving, not really hanging out with us.
Yeah.
And that changed everything. I mean, that was my firstborn son. And it was through his life that eventually led me to go back to church because it was his first Easter. I didn't know what people did. Like I was like, woohoo, holiday. I used to get wasted, but with my son, he was about 6 months old. Um, it was his first Easter, and I didn't know what to do with him, but he was old enough that like he can go out now, like we can do stuff. Because for the first several months, especially with your first kid, like you don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
I was 19, like I barely turned 19, like 2 weeks before, and I didn't know what to do with my son. And I started seeing the church signs on people's yards, and crosses, and that he's risen, and these things that I was like, oh, that's what I can do. That's a safe place I can take my son. Like we can go do that.
Yeah.
And I went to the church that I had gone to, and um, I guess like we had a church we would go to when I was in like at 12 and throughout my teenage years, but we weren't connected. And so I went there to go visit, and I took my son, and I heard the resurrection story of Jesus, and it just all made sense to me now. Like my sin, the reason why Jesus had to die on the cross was to make a way for me, that I did belong. I had this pastor telling me that, you know, that his grace was enough, and that no matter what we had done, we all are welcome to the kingdom of God. And it just changed everything. I was so humbled by my sin in my life, but I realized then that that was real love. That was the love that I was always meant to be a part of, and to receive. And it just changed everything. I gave my life to the Lord that Sunday, and I went home. I was staying with my mom, and my stepdad, and I remember I bust through the door. I was just like glowing, and I was just like, I get what the big deal is about Jesus. She's like, what? I was like,
Yeah.
I get it. I understand. I I went to church, and I think I'm going to go back. I think we're supposed to do this more often. And that just changed everything. And I always, and I explained to my mom, because she was surprised. She's like, what are you talking about? Like, we
Yeah.
brought you up believing in Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
I believed in Jesus.
Right.
I thought that the story of the cross was just another Bible story. Like, we
Yeah.
have all these incredible stories about God in the Bible. I didn't get that Jesus' story was the whole story. Like, that was the
Right.
whole point.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like Jesus was like another character, like Jonah and the big fish,
Right. Right.
Jesus and the cross. It
Yeah.
wasn't like my salvation story to me. I
Wow.
didn't identify that to be what makes me a child of God.
Yeah.
That changed everything. And then entering motherhood just like 6 months before that, understanding that something I can love more than anything else in this world,
Yeah.
you know, a reason to have a purpose,
Yeah.
it's what I figured, like I have a reason to live. Now I'm a mom. I have to do whatever I have to do to take care of this person that God's given me to take care of. And so God really used motherhood and my son to filter out people, filter out substances, my time, where I was spending my time. We started going to church all the time. Like anytime the doors were open, we were trying to be there. And he didn't actually like going to church, my son. He would, I'd always get caught out of service. He would scream and cry, but I had this couple that they would just kind of smile at me and say, just keep coming, just keep coming. It's okay, we'll call you if you can't calm him down, but don't stop coming. And I needed that. I needed somebody to keep pushing me
Yeah.
to to not feel like an inconvenience, to not
Right.
feel like I don't belong. And that man's gone to be with the Lord now, but I'll never forget how much those words really touched me to keep going.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say like that was that was one of the worst parts of my story.
Yeah.
That we came out of that, and that was my introductory to salvation with Jesus.
Praise God.
Yeah.
I just think it's incredible how God gave his one and only son to die on the cross, but God gave you your very first son to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also find it not by chance that you named him Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet. Isaiah
Yeah.
was a prophet. Your son was like a prophet coming into your life saying, "You need to live, woman. You have to take care of me now," you know?
For real.
Yeah, like you birthed a prophetic son to save your life.
I didn't even know that was a name in the Bible. Isaiah, I got his name from a dream I had playing with two little boys in my dream, and I was a really lonely child, so I
Yeah.
was like, I had the best time playing with these boys in my dream, and I remember telling them, I'll name my kid after you if I ever have children. And
Wow.
I stuck, that never left me. And so there's a lot of God winks
Yeah.
in Isaiah's story. And I
Yeah.
did ask him beforehand, I was like, I can't really share my testimony story without talking about you. So
Yeah.
it's like, I need your permission. And he's like, of course, Mom. And
Oh,
and so
we
yeah,
love Isaiah. He's a sweetheart. He's so sweet.
he
So
is. He is. He's 20 now.
I know it's
I
crazy. I
know he'll be 20
watched your
this
children
year.
like literally like grow up. It's
Oh
crazy.
man, I know. But yeah, that was the beginning of a Christian walk, a new believer's walk, and but I still just had so much stuff to work through,
Yeah.
and being a single mom, um, being, I guess, how do I put this? Not understanding love, romance, things like that, and
Yeah.
even motherhood, adulthood. I didn't really have like teenage years to like look back on. So raising a kid was terrifying, and I remember just thinking like, I just want to do whatever the Bible says.
Yeah.
And the problem is I didn't really read it like
Yeah.
I should have.
Yeah.
And I was still making life decisions, not reading it.
Yeah.
One of those was the father of my other two children, um, which was my first husband at the age of 22. He was in the military and a friend of the family to a cousin of mine, also serving in the military. And this was during the time of MySpace.
Yes. MySpace era.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he
Everyone
saw my profile on MySpace, and
love it for space.
right? I must have had a good song playing or something. I
I
don't know.
know, right? Ooh, your graphics were really just amazing.
But man, he was very persistent, and I I don't know. I was like, I have to marry somebody that believes in God. He said he believed in God. I said okay, and we got married.
Check.
Yeah, yeah. I
He must be
totally
a
made
believer.
that mistake.
Yeah. He must be a believer. He said so. So,
Yeah, yeah. Later, I found out we did not necessarily believe the same. And honestly, I think you know, um, I know that our children are supposed to be here, and we really tried to work through a lot of different things. But we were married for, I think, almost 5 years, and I lived in like near Austin through that. situation. But his deployment, we married really quick. So we dated for like 3 months, got married, and then we lived as husband and wife for a week, and then he was deployed to Iraq for about 2 years.
Oh my
And so it was wild. And we were so young. We were so young. And we thought that we were going to be okay. But while he was deployed, he was supposed to be a mechanic and just stay on the base working on tanks and trucks and stuff. But they changed his job to be EOD, which is explosive something or other. I don't remember. But it is a very, very dangerous thing to do in the military. And it exposed him to a lot of things, a lot of trauma. And I mean, like physically and mentally, but there was just a lot to work through. He became violent when he came back home. And I guess that led to another season, not just learning more, like, he wasn't the only one changing. I was changing too. I was being refined and reading my Bible, learning more, becoming more devoted to my identity in Christ. And well, when we merged back together, you know, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And the more I grew in my faith, the more it seemed that he disliked who I was. And ultimately it left. We separated for a lot of reasons. The biggest reason was safety. He knew that he was not a person that could keep us safe from himself. And with what he was experiencing, he chose to leave. And but then he would I remember just sometimes I would get messages of like very aggressive, very threatening, because he thought I had people watching him. He became very paranoid, and like we were not safe. The kids and I were not safe. So we did go into hiding. Not only did I have now 3 kids, but I never went back to school. I was in school when we met, but because of his deployment, and I was actually doing really well. I was in school. I had a great job. I say I was in daycare, but I flipped my life upside down to marry this man and to go be his wife. And you know, we were both completely different people. I didn't have no idea what our story would have been had it just stayed like that. But it turned out to be a different story. But the kids and I did end up having to go to a women's shelter for our safety. We couldn't go with family because he knew where our family would be, and they also didn't feel safe. They didn't think any of us would be safe. So we went to a shelter, and at the time I was living in Cyprus, but the shelter that had room for us was in Webster. And that's what led me back to the church that we met at, and in that time of my life. Isabella was my daughter's about 1, and the boys were like 2 and 5. And so it was really hard. The first night at the shelter, because we left everything in a hurry, it wasn't the first time I was exposed to or been in a domestic violence situation. There's several different moments in my life, but I didn't really know what domestic violence was.
Right.
I didn't know markers about abusers. I learned that in the shelter. I learned that I'm allowed to have an opinion without, worried about getting smacked, or someone violently attacking me. I learned certain characteristics in people that you can know are abusers or prone to be abusers of some sort. I'm really grateful, even though it was a sad situation to be in a woman's shelter with my kids. We lived there for almost a year. A lot of families do, a lot of women were there. But it really helped me become an adult. There's structure in them, in the sense of you have your chores, you meet with a counselor to discuss goals to become independently stable. I went back to school. The child care is on a hidden location on site, so my kids were able to, stay there, and I know that they were safe, from our abuser, which I can honestly say now that they're older, they told me nothing ever happened. But I was always skeptical, of leaving them anywhere.
Right.
And, but that really helped. And honestly, I remember, and I'm just going to share this about God. I'm going to boast on Him. I remember there was this hard time in my life because even though I had become saved, walking in righteousness or following Jesus, I had a lot of refining to do. And I remember there was this hard place I was in when I recognized, like, my husband wants me to drink and get drunk with him, or he wants me to, what he has, have a good time, but it compromises what I know, my walk with him. And I remember talking to the Lord about it, and he just said it to my heart, would you follow me even if it means you lose your husband? And I had to resolve within my heart then and there, I lose everything. I don't, like, to me, my life with God was everything. And He had made Himself known to me in such powerful ways, like literally going from death to life.
Yeah.
And so I remember being in the shelter and coming to those terms of, like, I learned that he wanted a divorce. He met somebody else and he had wanted a divorce. And I found out through Facebook. So I was crying with the Lord about it, because in my mind, when we initially went to the shelter, it was, we're just going to work through this. I still had so much hope that, God was going to fight for my marriage, and, He would heal him. We would get better. But when adultery became the situation and my husband wants a divorce, I really wanted to be like, no, you're not. You're going to just be stuck in your affair. She's never going to get to marry you. I married you first.
A little bit of the old me
I'm
coming
just
out.
spiteful that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like anybody in their humanness would feel that way.
Yeah. But I was
Really.
hanging out with a friend, and she recommended that I read 1 Corinthians 7. And it talks about a non-believer, wanting to depart. It says to let them depart because we are called to live in peace. And I realized that I was in sin with my spitefulness of, like, I'm not divorcing you. I was refusing to let him depart, not because I was for my marriage, but it was in the wrong heart. But when I read that verse and I realized, like, well, I'm going to obey what God says. And I do want to live in peace. I want to live in His peace. And so I did come to those terms of, like, okay, I'm losing my husband. About that same time frame, I I was doing chores. I had already put my kids to bed, and I had the late night chores with another person in the shelter and another mom. She also had 3 kids. We're about the same age. And she came to me while I was mopping the floors in the cafeteria, or our eating area. It wasn't a cafeteria, it's not that big. But she came to me and she said, she's like, she's like, I'm in the same situation as you are in. And I see that you have something different about you in our situation. Whatever you have, I want it. And this is about the time I was going to overflow a lot. And I was understanding that, like, to be brave and talking to people about my faith. And I got, and I said, well, the only difference is it's God. I have I have God here with me. And I said, let's meet up afterwards. And so we met up, and she did have a Christian background. And through our conversation, she recommitted her life to Jesus.
Wow.
I had never shared my faith before. Like, I had never witnessed that transformation. And when it happened, I was just so grateful to be there.
Yeah.
It made losing the life I had just, been puzzling together, that just disintegrated, into, we don't know what's happening next. We don't even have a home. I have 3 kids, no education, no home, no idea of what I'm doing. The one thing I do know is that God is real. Jesus made a way for us to be a part of his kingdom, and I'm going to follow him.
Amen.
I don't know what that means, but I'm going to follow him. And turned out that she ended up getting transferred the next day.
Wow.
So, like, we didn't get to, like, develop a friendship, but the impact of witnessing what God was doing through the whole situation behind the scenes, I had no idea that I was ministering. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
It was something God was doing.
You're
And
being
yeah.
the light.
What did you say?
I said you were being the light.
Yeah. And when that happened, I just remember telling the Lord, like, that's my purpose. That's why I'm here. I'm going to tell everybody about you. And I said, I'm not by any means, and I mean, I look at my life and I'm like, by no means am I, like, qualified or, this beautiful, picture perfect Christian that a lot of women are, especially beautiful women that give their life to Jesus really young, and they have this powerful story.
Yeah.
But I'm a mess, and I've always been a hot mess.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's ever seen me through and somehow gotten me out of, the dirt that I've known is Jesus. And I'm going to tell everybody.
Come on.
And that changed everything. I ended up getting into trouble in the shelter because I started a prayer team in our like, multi-purpose room.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just like, once I knew that was my purpose in the Lord, oh man, I was so excited. I'm like, this is a mission field. This women's shelter is a mission field. And God just changed so much of my perspective on life. And I learned to embrace the singleness and to embrace the hardship, of raising my 3, but always making it fun. Like, we had fun. It was all about the Lord, and we started connecting with missionaries. We would do car washes to raise funds for the missionaries. That's actually how I used to raise money for my raves. We would have car washes, and then God redeemed that later.
Wow. Come on.
And I mean, I look back on it and I'm like, wow, I was radical with my kids.
Radical mom.
I know. Like, we were making posters, going to support missionaries. We did free car washes so that people could share the gospel with while other people are, waiting for their car to get washed. I mean, everything became about telling people about Jesus and his love and his grace. And that was all. That's always been enough, you know. And I mean, I just look back now. That situation could have been so dark, and I
Yeah.
know a lot of women live in that victim mentality and situation. But God really like made a switch. Like, you're done being a victim.
Yes.
You're victorious in me, and I'm going to see you through. And
From,
we did. We somehow. What
from
was that?
I was gonna say from victim to victor.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
victorious in Christ. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's
It's
all we
amazing.
needed. Yeah. And
So
being.
after and so then at some point you're going to the church. I get saved, and we both met at the connection booth.
Yeah.
And trying to remember, we went through so much. I think didn't you take like a Bible college course with me at one
Yeah, we
point?
did. We
Yeah,
did.
if I remember correctly, because I remember like a group of us coming over to your old apartment and like doing something. I can't remember like
We were
every
taking hermeneutics together, I think.
hormones. That's what it was.
Hermeneutics, or I think it was church history,
Yeah, and
even.
history.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
couldn't do all of the whole program because I had to work and I had the kids, and um but I was just faithful, one thing at a time, what I could do. I
it
saw
was.
it through, and that was such a sweet time of
It was
in
such a
our
sweet.
classroom.
Oh
Yeah.
my god, it was awesome. And
Sometimes I still wonder if I even got everything, but
no, it was in and out for sure. It was so deep, the way that they would teach. Their classes were
yeah.
college level, deep classes, you know.
Hmm.
But but yeah, and then the Lord, kind of started speaking to me about starting Heart of Dance, and I just remember coming up to you and I'm like, "Hey, I really feel like you're supposed to be a part of this ministry." And you're like, "Okay, cool. What is it?" And I'm like, "It's a rave ministry." And you're like, "All right." And then I remember like, "Okay, well, I'll get back to you. I'm gonna like figure out what the logo is supposed to look like. I'm gonna pray about it." And I just remember like, I mean, we were just so simple back then, just trying to like, start from nothing. We literally
Hmm.
started from absolutely nothing. And I just remember sitting there like praying. I'm like, "Lord, what does the Heart of Dance logo look like?" And I opened my eyes and I was at work at the time. And the sweet and low packets,
Yes.
sweet and low packets, the pink packets,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
a sweet and low, and it's like a music note thingy. I just remember I'm like, "Laura, what is this supposed to look like?" And then I opened up my eyes, and then I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, that looks like music. That's so cool. And I'm like, "Yeah, instead of sweet and low, it'll say Heart of Dance." And then I remember taking the logo like rough draft. I had somebody at church sketch it up. I'm like, "Okay, it's got to have a rainbow in it because we're taking back the rainbow." And music notes and like lots of stars. I mean, I went through so many like different phases of like trying to figure out the logo. But anyway, whenever I finally felt like this was it, I remember y'all walking up to Laura. I'm like, "Hey, check out the Heart of Dance logo. What do you think?" And you're like, "Let's go get it tattooed." That was your response. And I was like, I mean, she's ride or die friend. She's like, dude, that would be an awesome tattoo, man. And I'm like, yeah, but we never did it,
We never did it. But yeah, I love
It
that
was a cool idea,
story. That's totally what I would have said.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember that, but you're like, yeah, we should go get it tattooed. I will never forget that. That was your response to the Heart of Peace logo when we first started putting this thing together. And here we are, man, just step by step. God has brought us on a both journey of like, redoing a lot of our past using Heart of Dance to like redeem raves, redeem music, redeem dancing, redeem how we even worship, right? Like even like altar, it's like you can't worship to house music. What are you talking about?
Oh man, like? I wish I had a way to see
It's
my
the
face
rhythm, it's just wild. How
when you
God
introduced Christian EDM to me, and I'm like, is this for real?
I know, and I was like that too. I'm like, is this allowed, God? Like,
Yeah.
is that like, I mean, I'm like, that sounds sinful to me. I'm just saying,
I know.
the Lord's like, Tiffany, and he really unraveled a lot of like knots that were confusing and that we just didn't know,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just didn't know. And there's like amazing worshipful music that is, you know, beautiful,
Yeah.
and it's very worshipful and it's fun. It's got a beat, it's fun to work out to. Everybody likes the Hillsong and, Jesus culture or whatever, Brandon Lake remix, you know, like it's awesome. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Hey, Lisa's on. What's up, Lisa? It looks like she like a while ago, and I just now seeing that. I remember when we went and helped with your car wash. That's what Lisa said.
Yeah. Yeah, she did. I don't
I
know.
can't
It was
remember. Was I there? I don't remember.
I mean, I would pull in anybody and everybody.
Yeah, I'm sure
I
you are.
remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was just such a sweet time of a ministry. And I mean, now a ministry, just we're still at it. It just looks different.
yeah,
And I that time was just so precious. And I kind of learned the difference between, like, making a good yes when it comes to doing things for the Lord. I think that through my time of being a believer and being married and unequally yoked, um, when I was in a way set free from that, I just kind of I just head dove into all of it. And actually, about the time that we met, I had just been talking to another friend of mine about, like, going to evangelize at a rave. I'm like, I don't know that the church is even there, but they're still happening. We can
yeah,
find one. Let's go
yeah,
and evangelize at a rave.
yeah. Boy, it's so
um,
crazy how
yeah,
God, it's like divine timing, and God, I didn't even know you, and God speaking to you about it. And
yeah,
here I am thinking that nobody in the whole church world had ever heard of a rave. None of that. It was so hidden, and God has used us to expose what has been going on. Churches have heard of like hip hop music, things like that, with like gangs, hip hop, whatever. They had heard of heavy metal, like death metal, whatever, that kind of like genre. They've heard of like rock, all of these other things. But whenever it actually came down to like electronic dance music and what was actually happening at these kinds of events, it's like, if God hasn't raised us up, pulled us out of that, raised us up for such a time as this, to use us as a mouthpiece to share with the church, hey, this is the rebranding of the 1960s, of the hippie movement. It's all about the peace and the love and the all the drugs and the free and all this kind of stuff, right? And because that's
yeah,
what the enemy does at the end of the day. He can't create So he just repackages things like every generation, and that the raves are today's hippie movement.
Well, I will say though, like the individuals that I was going to the raves with, they had no idea that they were being used and that secretly behind the scenes I was intentionally planning to like use it to like commit suicide. Like they didn't know that my mental state was in such a bad place. From the outside person like going to a rave with me, I was happy, I was excited, I was dressed up and the party person. And I was generally that way with a bunch of people. And so there's this facade of like fake it till you make it in
Yeah,
the scene that I think a lot of people live in.
right.
And the fact of the matter is like if I had known that it was a counterfeit to what could really be, like that sobriety could be enjoyed, that dance could be considered worship, that could be a connection to God through music, through my intentional heart to Him. And I think, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot there. I mean, there's still a lot of different people that I know that still go to um, great lengths to normalize music festivals.
Right.
And I've even seen it in Disney, kid shows that
Yes.
the kid characters are going to a music festival, or in movies where the
Yeah.
mom's taking their child to the music festival.
Yeah.
And there's this push to like normalize it.
Yeah.
But my
100%.
experience of it as a teenager was it's not like that. Like there is a lot of danger in that agenda. There is a different agenda
Yeah.
through it, and I think there's a lot of predators that jump on board to these massive dance, festivals, or whatever they're going to call it, music festival, rave, dance festival, whatever they're going to title it and market it. There's a lot of other things happening behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and I like that Heart of Dance is a ministry that we've prayed about and intentionally want to be a bridge to connect to people that might have been like us,
Yeah.
or might, I mean, I can honestly say, like, even though I lived completely outside of what Jesus taught, or was, I knew I was not supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
I still had this background of my Christian faith and my simple misplaced understanding of who Jesus was. To me he was God, but he wasn't my Lord. And I did not understand salvation at the time, and that took it took God doing the impossible to break me out of that. And I have to say, there's so many impossible things that he's done. Getting me out of the domestic violence situation where my spouse was trained to take lives and very much feared that he would, so that he had to leave. It was almost impossible to get out of that situation, but God made a way. I guess one of my other stories that I love to share is that God called me to do missionary work while I was a single mom, like sending me to Africa. And then with my husband, we got to go to Cuba. I mean, going overseas is awesome, but it started first here. It started in a women's shelter.
I was gonna say, share with the audience, like, after, like, how you met Joel, really quick, because we're gonna wrap it up for the night. But
Yes.
she is happily married now with someone that is not a picture. Just we're just saying.
No, Joel. Joel was a calling for my life, because I had never found anything safer than my singleness with the Lord. Even though like there's all these other obstacles of financial support for the kids and things like that, but I was safe and my kids were safe. But Joel,
Not what I
I
at all. She was
huh?
terrified. I just have to throw that out there. I remember like telling you about it, and like
Oh
me and
my
you both on the
gosh.
same level at that time. We're like, we're never getting married. We're never gonna like guys, like cooties,
Well, it wasn't even that. I honestly had trauma.
Yeah,
I
it was.
had physical trauma, and I had um, these issues that needed to be worked out, but they protected me, and I had I I don't even know how to describe it, but I had some experiences of having to learn how to be a single Christian woman. It's different than being a single non-Christian woman,
Yeah,
and that was something
right.
that I had never experienced, because even though I gave my life to the Lord, I married soon afterwards. And so there were all these things that I had to learn about, like even within the church, about being a single mom and woman. But Joel, I I love our story, and I tell him that all the time.
I
Like, I
love this.
love our story and
Share
what
your
God
story
did.
really quick, and then that's how we're gonna end the evening.
Okay, so I didn't meet Joel right away, but I knew who he was. I had been with some friends that allowed us to, um, that allowed us, like, we would take our lunch break and we would pray. And we'd each have a list of names of people that we would pray for with their permission. And Joel was one of the names on my friend's list. And for years, like 7 years, I had been praying for Joel, and I never met him. He says that we did meet, but I didn't remember, or I don't recall it, but he says we did meet. But it wasn't until like 7 years later we ended up going to the same church together, and I was serving in children's church. He was serving in children's church, and after we passed each other, he says, I'm so and so's friend, Joel," and he's like, "You've been praying for me," and I was like, "Yeah, I've been praying for you." I was like, "Wow, we finally meet," and then we ended up getting put in, not on purpose, like the church did it. We taught a 3-year-old class together, and we made a good team, and I had been, I think it was like maybe a year, at least a year, we had been serving together. So we had each other's phone numbers, but I had very strict rules to not message men. If they needed to talk to me, it had to be in the contents of like why we were serving. Otherwise, I just ghost them, you know. But we would message each other like what snacks we were bringing for the kids. It always had to be like classroom related, and Joel never messaged me about anything outside of that, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I was going through a season of acknowledging God was releasing me from my singleness, and it terrified me.
Yeah,
You prayed with me a lot.
I did. I
and
did.
uh, and I just have to say that if anyone can relate, prayer is powerful.
Yes, it is.
And I had actually like fasted my sleep one night, and I stayed up with the Lord, like crying, like mourning the loss of my singleness,
Yes,
and just
by
like,
the way, I'm
and I
single
was
for the rest of
worshiping.
my life.
I know. I was worshiping and just centering myself on Jesus, and finding that like I can trust him. And if that's the next thing, then I'm going to trust him. But I did make one request, and that was for an Isaac and Rebecca story. Like, I wanted the Holy Spirit to make an arranged marriage. I was like, I can't trust you caught my eye, or, hey, let's meet up, or, nothing. I didn't want anything of man, but I really was just praying and asked God, like, somehow, can I have an Isaac and Rebecca story? And the next day, Joel texted me in the morning, and he said, he's like, I don't know why, but I felt led to share my devotional with you. And he just sent me the scripture reference, and I was like, okay. I'm like, that's weird. He never messages like personal stuff, and like, you're crossing the line. No, so I didn't say anything.
Scripture, you're crossing the
I know, I'm like, your devotional. Well, and when I looked it up, it was Isaac and Rebecca. It was their passage, and I was like, what? I remember, like,
wait, you were listening
what,
last
Lord? Yeah. God, is that you? And I'm still doubting.
night? Oh no, no, no! Cliffhanger, you guys. She'll probably be right back. She's done this before. Laura, come back. I'm in the middle of your story. Okay, sorry, y'all. Thank you guys. Oh, here she is. Let me bring her back on. Hold on, hold on. Thank you for your patience. And she's not back. Wait, what the heck? Come back.
There you go.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay.
Hello.
I don't know why you keep doing that, girl. What happened?
I don't even know, but I know we've got to hurry up. We've been chatting. This happens to us all the time. We can talk
I know,
forever.
I know. It's been 2 hours, but I'm like on
So
a cliffhanger. So
I know I built it all up, right?
I know, and then you like disappeared. I'm like, wait,
So I was still doubting, and I worked in a glass building, and I'm like really high up in a tall building. I look up, and there was a giant rainbow cutting across the clouds in front of me, which to me, I always see it as a sign of promise. And sorry, my cat. but, but that was enough to, like, I messaged Joel back, and I told him, like, thank you for sharing your. I actually have screenshots of our text, but I said thank you for sharing it. And he messages, do you think God's trying to tell us something? I was like, oh, maybe. And we agreed to meet up for lunch. And in our lunch meeting, we decided to fast for 3 days and pray without communication. And during that time, God revealed to him a confirmation of like, this was his will. And it took me the last day, like the last day. I mean, I literally had asked God for like another way to know for sure. And I had been sharing the gospel lots of different times, evangelizing for 2 years, and I hadn't led anybody. But you still share, even though people don't accept. You still share. But that day, we had decided to go evangelize at the mall, and then we would discuss what God revealed to us afterwards. And well, I had asked God to, like, allow me to lead somebody to the Lord if Joel was the person he was calling me to be a wife to. And the last person I spoke to, she accepted Jesus as her Lord. And
wow.
I mean, like, the mall was closing. It was like the last person in the food court.
Never a
And
second too late. Never a second too late.
yeah, yeah. And I was able to tell Joel, like, that was what God gave me as a yes. And he shared with me his confirmation, which might be too long to go into, but
Yeah.
there was just so many multiple ways for us to know, and just this incredible story of God in the center of it. And it was just a matter of walking by faith to to enter that season of being a wife. I'd never wanted to be a wife again, but God has redeemed that also.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just looking back, and it's like 20 something years with the Lord is no part of it's wasted. There's
Yeah.
always something good to boast about in Him.
Praise God.
Um, yeah.
I remember during the season of not wanting a husband, this was years before Joel. I remember I had that dream, and I told you like that I was inside of your future home and you got married. I was standing at your bookshelf in a dream, and I just knew I was like, she's gonna get married, and I could explain that the house was down the road from a street light outside because it was like just very strange. Like God was just showing me like that you were gonna be married, and I saw your house and everything. And I remember sharing that dream with you, and you're like, "Oh no!" Like that was you're like, "No, no, that couldn't be for the Lord." Like I'll never. Years later, you
Oh my
guys
God.
married, and then you moved into that house.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
"Wow!" Like I was so blown away by that, and that's
Yeah.
like so encouraging. So if anybody's having dreams about me, like let me know. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was incredible, and Joel Joel's perfect for you. So
He is.
such a
Yeah.
sweetheart.
He is. He's a good guy. I got a good one. Well, God picked him.
Go God, go God, get your husband off. I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, it's amazing, and what an incredible story. It is always so nice to actually sit down and start from the beginning to like where you are right now, and just to kind of see what God has brought you through, out of Egypt into the promised land, to where you're at. And I just think it's absolutely beautiful. And thank you so much for being vulnerable. Thank you so much for sharing such intimate things that most people wouldn't share about what they've encountered and been through. And yeah, just thank you so much, Laura. This
Well,
was such
thank
a
you.
special treat. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And,
Yeah, I am happy to share. It is different than like sharing, like just saying it. It is different, but thanks
yeah,
for inviting me on your podcast.
yeah,
It's
of
awesome.
course. Um, I do want to say I'm out, but before that, I do want to just let everybody know that Laura is one of our key speakers coming up SOAR, which is a Christian dance podcast where the theme is Christmas and it's on Flag Day, which is a holiday about how the American flag was like brought into our nation and how God showed me to do Eagle flags next. And it ends up on Flag Day, and that was not meant to be originally. And so I really feel like the Lord is going to do something very powerful on that day. So
Yeah.
if you guys do not have your tickets yet, get them before it's too late. We still have some, and it's at my new church, at the Refuge. Love you guys, love y'all. But yeah, we're having it at my church. It's going to be so sweet. Lori's going to be sharing from her heart. She's going to be teaching. We're going to teach on dance. We're going to teach on flag, on worship, and then we're closing the night out with a smoke party with a Christian DJ. So that is going to be so fun. Dinner is included. So you can go on our website, which is www.heartofdance333.net, grab your tickets, and click on upcoming events, and hopefully we will see you there. But other than that, we love you guys. We thank you again for watching. And Laura, I'm just going to have you pray us out, girlfriend.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Father, I thank you for our journeys with you. I thank you that We we come as we are, Lord, and you accept us, and you want to continue to grow us. I pray for just this upcoming conference, Lord, the SOAR. Um, it has been, it's on your heart, God. You have just imparted to us something on your heart that we get to participate in, Lord. And we're excited, God. I pray that you make a way for those that you are calling to be a part of it, to be bold, um, to just be obedient, to step out in faith, and to come and sit at your feet, God. Thank you for your word. Your word is just, it's life changing, and I pray that you would continue to send it out through the Heart of Dance ministry. I pray for Tiffany, God. I thank you so much for her life and for our partnership, our sisterhood that we have in you, Jesus. I pray that you would bless her, keep her, and make your face shine upon her, God, and continue to make a way for others, Lord, to boast in you, to just um, fix ourselves in your presence, God. Um, I just pray for the listeners, God, for Tiffany's audience, Lord, the social butterfly audience, God. Would you, um, would your spirit just minister to them right where they're at, whatever season they're in, whatever they're going through, whether they're on the mountaintop, whether in the valley low, God. I pray that your spirit would just use this ministry, this podcast, to encourage them to speak life through each person, each conversation, each video, God. We pray for you to just bring the people that you want to listen in. And it's in your name, Jesus. Amen.
In Jesus' name. Amen and amen, girl. Thank you again, Laura. I love you so much, girl. And I'm so looking forward to our conference coming up.
Yeah, me too.
Another shameless plug. But but all right, guys. Well, y'all have a super blessed night. Love you guys. Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Lisa, for tuning in. Love you, ladies. Thank you for everybody else that's watched. And later down the road, if you guys want to know anything more about Heart of Dance, feel free to message us through our website. Again, that's www.heartofdance333.dance. Other than that, I am your host, Tiffany Barney, and we are signing out. Bye, guys.
Bye.